And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. Today, I am so excited to have my good friend Kyle Mills back on the show with me. This has to be, Kyle, what, your 15th, 16th
It
trip here?
seems like it. How
The,
long have you been doing it?
uh, 10 years this year. This
Yeah,
is
so
this has been a
probably
decade. Yeah, it's
pretty close
we've
to.
done this quite a while.
Yeah, I imagine
Um,
I was pretty close to being on your first year.
yeah, I think so. I think you were definitely in the first 100 episodes for sure, and we've done over 1,500 now. So,
Wow.
yeah, we've it's been fun, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we keep coming back to do more. Kyle has a brand new book. This is book 22. Is that right in the Mitch Rapp series, Kyle?
Yes. 22 in the Trap series. Yep. My
And
23rd.
it's your 23rd, and it is called Code Red. I tell you what, Kyle, when I first got the advance arc from David at Simon Schuster at Atria, I loved the first thought was when I saw the title Code Red, I thought back to A Few Good Men, that movie,
Oh
and
yeah, me
they yeah
too. Yeah.
yeah and they kept talking about ordering the Code Red on, and I just had a chuckle about that. That is not what this book is about, but it
No.
is a
No.
thrill ride from page one. Um, Before we get started, Kyle, I noticed on Twitter a couple of days ago, I think it was, you posted that you were ghost hunting in a haunted tuberculosis hospital. What is that about?
Yeah. There's this. I'm a big mountain biker still, and there's a park way up the mountain behind the city I live in Spain, and there's this, like, in the backcountry, there's this tuberculosis hospital that's supposed to be haunted. It's a very famous place where people go. I, I can't remember what the word is, psychotherapia or something. They go to listen to like spooky ghost sounds. I don't know. And
Oh
I've been
wow.
looking for this thing forever. I've covered like every like back road and trail, and I could never find it. And the heat finally broke, and I said, I'm going up there and find this thing. And so I did. I rode around until I found it. Um, but I've been trying to find that thing for like 2 years.
did did you encounter anything weird when you?
I did not. No, honestly, it's not even a great story. It was a really nice hospital during the that really cared for people in this beautiful
Yeah.
location, and but it later became a barracks in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh wow.
They had to abandon it. So interesting history, and I love history. So I thought I
Yeah.
just really want to find this place and
Well, it
find
made for a great Twitter post or
it.
X post, whatever it is these days.
And an
That's
incredible victory. I've been up there in the snow. I've
oh
been
wow.
looking for the, but now I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm like, I've lost my purpose in life.
You're like that dog that chases cars, and then when he finally catches
Yeah,
one,
you catch
when
it. Yeah.
somebody stops, it's like his life has no purpose after that. Kyle, it's funny that that just kind of got me thinking the other day that sometimes the strangest little experiences or occurrences um, kick off the what if game in our mind, and you never know what you're going to encounter that might stir up a story. Do you plan on using a place like that in any stories in the future? Did that spark anything for you?
Maybe, it's a really spooky setting. I years ago was in Lesotho in Africa, and I was driving around, and I noticed that the only really permanent buildings there were the morgues because AIDS had hit them really, really hard, and it was saying like
Mm,
mortuary kind of painted on the side of the cinder blocks. And I thought, man, that's really super impactful to think about what it had done to this country. And I was like, I got to use that one day. And sure enough, somebody tried to torture Mitch Rapp in a Lesotho morgue at one point because it was just such a like disturbing image.
yeah. Wow.
So you never know. Maybe one of my characters. I can convince Don Bentley to send Mitch Rapp ghost hunting.
You know, I think you just need to start dropping those hints to Don. What if
Yeah.
Mitch goes ghost hunting? That
Like
would be
go
funny.
horror. Go Stephen
Right.
King.
right. Just drive that car straight off the cliff. Yeah. Um, One thing that Code Red, one of the kind of main topics or jumping off points is the idea of asymmetrical warfare. What is asymmetrical warfare, and how did that come to your attention and kind of start percolating to drive the plot of this book?
Yeah, so in the context of this book, I was thinking about Russia's ability to project power even though they don't have much, with propaganda, bribery, blackmail, all these things that they do around the world to further their interests. When, clearly they don't have a very large economy. It's about the size of Texas, or it was. Now it's much smaller,
Yeah.
and they don't. Their military is third rate. So um, that's what I was interested in. I feel like war between major powers, or war, conventional war now, is a losing proposition. There was a time, go back hundreds and hundreds of years, where war was a pretty good deal. You get a bunch of land, you could use the resources, enslave the
Right.
population. You can make money essentially. Now you can't. The cost of war is so high and the benefits are so low. You kind of have to be crazy to get into it. Russia proving that right now. Hopefully, China
Right.
won't prove it in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And
Let's hope.
so, but asymmetrical warfare, you can kind of win. It's hard to know prove who's doing it. So there aren't a lot of repercussions, and it's cheap. So I wanted to do something with that, but I wanted to find a new weapon. It's hard to have Mitch Rapp chasing after people who write mean Facebook posts, right? So that was where the
Right.
idea of Captagon came up, which is actually a real drug. But the idea that because the West, America and Europe, have pretty bad drug problems that are getting worse, that you could actually engineer a drug to be very destructive. Um, Fentanyl's destructive just because it is, but it wasn't designed
Right.
to be. And you could make it much worse than that. And that would be, to me, that would be something the Russians would do, just because they kind of just play to make everybody lose. There's strange group of people.
Yeah.
So that was what I came up with. It's an interesting threat. It's a very dire threat. It's totally feasible, particularly the fact Syria has become kind of a narco state. And I wanted to sort of play with that.
Yeah. The Russian component is interesting because in the late '80s, into the '90s, when um, Hunt for Red October and all those great Clancy books came out, there were very clear lines, between Russia or the USSR and the Western powers, and it was a
Mhm.
very clear delineation. And then the wall fell, and Russia kind of unraveled, and and then you had some different problems, like rogue bombs, and things that are left over from the fall of the Soviet Union. But then, the 2000s roll around and the Middle East becomes kind of the focal point, and Russia's kind of no longer on the radar. Well, sure enough, here we are, the beginning of the 2020s, and Russia is back. I've known some Russian people, and they are some of the kindest, family oriented people, just salt of the earth folks that come from a place where their leaders are just generally terrible. What is it about this place that just keeps coming, back up? And can, are you getting any feel for what's going on in this
Yeah,
part of the world?
I've spent a lot of time because I also wrote Red War, which is about years ago,
Yeah.
about them kind of invading Ukraine and the Baltics. Um, but honestly, I had to kind of give the head of Russia a brain tumor, like, to motivate him, because it was
Right.
like exactly what we were talking about before. There's no profit in war anymore. Why would somebody like Vladimir Putin, who has a reputation of being a
Yeah.
pretty rational and effective leader. By effective, I mean maintaining and growing his own power.
Yeah, and by
Um,
all accounts seems to be a smart guy.
a
That
smart guy who wants to
yeah,
be in power. And he
right,
does something like this and just completely whiffs it.
right,
I mean, I feel like maybe he's getting old and his brain's gone a little bit. So, yeah, it's an interesting. I think the Russians see themselves as having been downtrodden, been put upon by the Nazis certainly, but by Europe, looked down on, and they really like I think lash out in the most self-destructive way possible. I have no idea. It's like I think everybody in the world thought that when the wall fell down, eventually, like Russia would become part of the EU and part of NATO, and
right.
they'd be a great partner. But for some reason, they just have this need to sort of try to dominate, and they're not very effective at it. They're just not a very strong country. They haven't been really ever
Right.
kind of.
Well, they
So
make great fodders for novelists,
they do,
at
yeah. I mean,
this
God, the
point.
Clancy novels. I mean, Red War, right? I mean, that
Oh
was the
yeah,
threat of an actual war with the Soviet Union, which is a very different threat than the war with Russia, which wouldn't be too hard to tear through them with
yeah,
if they didn't have all those nukes left over. But um, now they just seem to want to destroy things for the sake. They just like to break dishes. I don't know why it's part of their DNA, but it is great because the thing I wrote about is a very feasible. It sounds very much like something they would do, and so they just haven't thought of it
right,
yet.
right. Well, Mitch Rapp is an interesting character to put into this kind of tempest in a teapot that's going on with Russia, because Mitch is an interesting guy that he kind of doesn't owe anybody anything, and you could argue that he's owed a lot, but he really is kind of untethered in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, except when Damien Losa calls on him. What is the draw that Damien holds over him?
Yeah, the problem with Mitch now, I guess good news, bad news, right, is that there was a long time that Mitch had, after his wife died,
Right.
didn't have any real connections. That makes
Yeah.
you strong, right? There's nothing anybody can use against you.
Right.
Now he does, right? He has Claudia and Anna. And a few books ago, Claudia was in danger. Criminals from her past were coming after her.
Right.
And the guy who was really the impetus of all this, no one could find. He's a cartel leader. He was very good at staying under the radar. The CIA didn't know, DAA, MI6, nobody knew where he was. But Mitch had met this cartel leader named Damian Lassa, who's probably the most powerful organized criminal in the world. I mean, everything from drugs to arm dealing, like you name it. I mean, he probably has, a bunch of Ford dealerships. He's
Right.
into everything. And Mitch thought that they were going to get her, that they had hired somebody that he thought might get by him and could kill her. And his only recourse was to call Damon Lawson and say, "Do you know where this guy is?" And Lawson said, "Well, yeah, sure I do. But what's in it for me?" As cartel leader types and organized criminals will say. And he says, and Mitch said, "Well, I'll owe you." And Lawson says, "That's good enough. Here's his address," basically. Um, but you knew that was going to come to
Oh
roost, right?
yeah. Well, it's
And here it
Chekhov's
is.
gun. Even it didn't come to fruition right away, but we know that if that gun is on the mantle, it's going to be used.
It's
Yeah.
exactly right. And so in this one, Damian Lassa is basically having business problems. He's having problems with competing with Syria, which the government is the narcotics dealer, moving in on his territory. And he says, well, Mitch Rapp's perfect. He's good at combat. Can pass as an Arab. He speaks Arabic. He knows the battlefield there, and he's completely expendable. If somebody shoots him in the head, it doesn't really even work for me.
Right.
So Mitch has to basically go in as the representative of this cartel to try to make a deal. And in the end, he discovers that this is much bigger than he thought. It wasn't the Syrians, it's really the Russians behind it. This is not a money making deal, it's a weapon. So then,
Right.
the CIA, which has said, you know, we're not involved in this at all, he has to try to get back to them and say, I think this is something that you'd be interested in, and you need to send me some resources to try to deal with it.
It was a brilliant way to bring this element into the story by using Damien because um you know Damien's not a great guy, but
No.
it's not the typical setup of this government agency needs to reactivate you, and it's all gung ho patriotic. It's not that at all. I mean, it kind of becomes that, but the impetus is a little dirty, and I love that about this. That was a genius way to kind of bring it all in.
It's kind of, yeah, it's funny because, he really does owe this guy. He's basically got, like, Mitch
Right,
Rapp's never in a position where he has to do what somebody tells him to. But in this case, the guy saved Claudia's life. And
right.
so, yeah, there's a point where, Mitch is like, well, where's my gun? And Lost is like, oh, guns, that's vulgar. My people, my executives don't carry guns. And so, Mitch is in the $10,000 suit with a $500,000 watch, basically going into Syria unarmed. He's like, you're a negotiator, not a shooter. I have shooters.
Right.
And, but of course, everything goes south and
Yeah.
he ends up being a shooter again.
One argument that I hear from people sometimes about series characters is that there are no real stakes for a series character because if you kill Mitch Rapp, there won't be a number 23 for Mitch
Mhm.
Rapp. And I think people confuse stakes with being able to kill a character. Like there are other stakes that can happen. It's kind of the Superman argument. Well, when you have an invincible superhero, what stakes are there? Well, all of his human family that care about him, and those are very real stakes. When you brought these other characters in for Mitch to rebuild a family and to rebuild these connections, was that an important part of kind of making sure there was always going to be tension there for Mitch?
Yeah, something for Mitch to really fight for. I
Yeah.
mean, he's getting older, he's
Fight
getting
for, that's a great
wiser,
way to
you
look
know.
at it.
Yeah, because now
Yeah.
you dial it in, right? What am I doing here? I mean, I keep it's like whack-a-mole, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I get this guy down, I get that, but now it's very personal. Like, who's he doing it for? He's doing it for Claudia and Anna, you know, or he's doing it for
Yeah.
his guys. It's like being in the military that, you know, sometimes maybe you're not thinking about the war, you're just thinking about making sure the guys with you are okay. It comes down to that, right? So,
Right.
and that's where, kind of where he is. I mean, I think about like a number of books ago, a guy named Grisha Azarov almost killed Scott Coleman. And Mitch was like the sniper, and Coleman was being killed by this guy. And the amount of just like incredible tension that he felt watching his friend die, and he couldn't do anything about it. And so these are the stakes, America, everything America stands for Mitch. It's not like exactly like you say, it's not that he's going to get killed. That's not important. It's
Right.
what is he trying to achieve?
Yeah. Yeah. We have kind of danced around it, but this is your last novel
Mhm.
in the Mitch Rapp series. 10 years. This It's been a wild ride, huh?
It's been amazing. I mean, really, I have to say, when I signed on, I had pretty low expectations. I thought people might hate me and uh, hate the books, and really um, not want it continued.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Vince, and anybody would be kind of a usurper, sort of, and that was not ever my intent. Um, I love the series just like everybody. You know, I started as a fan. And
Yeah.
so it's been an amazing ride. It's been super fun to have somebody give you, you know, your one of your favorite literary characters and say, "Hey, you know, have at it," right? So it's you know, it's been a real privilege to get to know the fans and to get to decide Mitch's next journey, like his arc. I think about his character has changed really significantly
Yeah.
since I've had him, and to be able to kind of watch him grow and decide where he was headed has just been an absolute blast, really.
Well, the world has changed significantly
Ugh.
since you took over Mitch. You know, that's the character had to grow and change because the world he inhabited was growing and changing.
It's crazy. I mean, I
Yeah.
think about the world, you know, it's sort of like BV and AV, like before Vince and after Vince.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying, the amount of change that's gone on. I mean, fundamentally, these were books about Islamic terrorism, which
Right.
is what was happening when Vince wrote these books. And it's sort of like the Soviet Union falling. I mean, it's still a threat, but I wouldn't say it's at the forefront of everybody's mind. And the world's become much more complicated. I'm sure Vince wouldn't have thought of really Russia too much as a threat. They were a little bit
Right.
dormant during his time period. So,
I
but
feel like
thrillers
Vince would have
have
said, "Well,
to
Clancy
be,
did that already."
yeah,
Yeah.
thrillers have to be current. You have to feel like, oh, this could be happening right now when you read them. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so Mitch had to evolve, the books had to evolve. And I tried to do that in a way that, I'm always thinking, how would Vince handle, what we're seeing now? Like, what would he write about? What would his
Right.
attitudes be toward it? And, hopefully I've channeled him, as faithfully as I've tried to.
Well, you said that thrillers have to be current and they have to be of the time, or else they don't have the same effect on readers. We're not a little terrified by the possibilities of what could really happen.
Right.
But the problem is that world events change so fast. And with the internet and news traveling literally at the speed of light, and you can watch on Facebook or Twitter live or on YouTube as citizen journalists, pull out their phone and
Right.
broadcast what's going on. A thing can have happened and been resolved before newspapers can get printed. So for a thriller writer who wants to stay current and wants to stay on top of world events, not only do you have to be informed about what's going on, but you have to predict in a way what will still be a threat, what is a minor skirmish that might be resolved before I can get the novel outlined, much more written. How do you juggle what is plausible without being old news by the time a novel comes out?
With great difficulty, really. I've gotten ahead of it a few times. I mean, certainly I've had to change books.
Yeah.
For instance, the last couple of books where you had the cooks, the president, I had to make significant changes to that after January 6th and, all the talk about the stolen election, everything like that, because that was supposed to be a part of a 3-book arc about kind of the fall of American democracy. And
A little too close to
it,
home.
it felt a little too on the nose. And I write political thrillers, but I don't want to be political. And I was
Yeah.
afraid that people would say, well, you're writing about Donald Trump or you're writing about Hillary Clinton or something like that. It's its own universe. It doesn't really
Right.
fully exist here. So,
You
I
want
had
to
to
be
kind of back
current
my way out of
without
that.
being you want to be current without being exploitative.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, and you'll notice that my books never have like Republican or Democrat in them.
Right.
They're not partisan at all.
Well,
These are
there's enough.
grander threats.
Well, there's enough awfulness to go around to both parties. Let's be honest.
Well, exactly. And a lot of stuff doesn't have anything to do with one party or another.
Right.
It's a grander threat. And so,
Yeah.
hopefully everybody, I don't know if this is true anymore, but hopefully everybody can say, Russia, whatever, trying to pawn off a bunch of really, really dangerous narcotics on the United States is bad. Like both parties think that's bad.
Let's hope
I'm
so.
entirely sure that's true.
Right.
That's the world that I've created.
Yeah, right. Well, from coming into a series with trepidation, not knowing how the readers were going to receive you, not knowing if the readers were going to want to follow, Mitch on new adventures and growth and all of that. After the first book comes out, people are liking it. No, okay, this was great. Maybe it's a fluke. Let's try another one. The second book comes out, people are enjoying it, and you start building a following, that people are on board. Well, then 10 years later, I would imagine, I would think, I know I would be, I would have a similar trepidation of wanting to get off this bus because, now I've earned all these people's trust and they're here with me and they're going along with me. What was that decision like to step out?
That's hard. I mean, it's kind of like the best job in the world. And,
Right.
you're leaving it. Seems kind of stupid. But, yeah, I think there's other things. First of all, there are other things I wanted to explore. I have a character named Fade that I'd written about years ago, and he's never
Oh
left
yeah.
my mind. I've always wanted to write another book about him, and I've been thinking about that forever. And also, I don't want to get too comfortable, that maybe I could start to feel a little rote or a little stale. And I think it's important for this series to have a new perspective every now once in a while. And
Yeah.
certainly, if you can find somebody good, I think that can be a positive. And we found Don Bentley, who's a terrific writer and a
Oh
huge
yeah.
fan of the series. And I think his background is different than mine. He's younger than me. He has different perspectives. Um, I think it's after 10 years, maybe it's time to see Mitch through a different set of eyes.
Well, I love Don, and I'm a huge fan of his work, and have gotten to know him over the last few years. And when I first heard the news that he was taking over the series, I was like, that's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see these three kind of eras
Yeah.
of Mitch Rapp, um, and to see where the character goes. It's going to be fun. I thought I had heard that you were going back to Fade. As you, I'm trying to remember that second Fade book. He he was assassinated, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote that book. So Fate is about this Navy SEAL who gets screwed over by the government and kind of goes on a bit of a murderous rampage. But he's really funny
Yeah,
and philosophical.
he's very quirky.
Yeah, he's a very quirky guy, right?
Yeah.
Likes to drive around in an old convertible Cadillac, playing the Go-Go's really loud and killing people. Um, and but he's really likable. Like I always said, I when I started that book, I said I'm going to make a really likable mass murderer, and I pulled it out. People love that character. They absolutely like
Oh
no
yeah.
character I've ever written before. People responded to that character, and but in my mind, the whole thing was about that he knew he was going to die at the end of this because he was slowly being paralyzed by this bullet in his back, and there was no way out for him. And he was just going to go on this last, essentially, college bender, in which he also killed a lot of people. And like kill all the people that screwed him over and just have a great time. And eventually somebody just shoot him. And in the end, that's kind of what he finally gets to the end. Nobody's shot him yet. Can't quite figure that out. But he finally gets to the end and has an opportunity and he lets them do it. And in my mind, that was necessary, that he had to die. Like nobody expected that at the end of that novel. I had created this character that we loved everything. They're like, well, he's not really dead, is he? Like, oh yeah, no, he's definitely really dead. Never wrote anything else about him. But then I started thinking, the more and more I started like thinking about him lying in a coma and how maybe he would have survived and what would he do if he came back. And 10 years I've been like taking little notes of things. I'd go for a run and I'd think about Fade. So it was time to resurrect him, almost literally.
Was He's a little bit like Mitch Rapp meets John Wick, in a weird kind of way. That's there's something about the anti-hero that I don't know, just scratches and a weird itch inside of us.
Well, it's funny. I had this scene in a Mitch Rapp book where it was right after Coleman got really badly injured, and Mike Nash was suggesting temporary replacements for him to Mitch, and Mitch is just shooting him down left and right, like he just wants Coleman back, right? And Nash is like, well, yeah, but he's got like like lacerated liver, like, you can't have him back. And the first draft I did, so Fade's real name is Salam Al Fayed. He's an Arab American, right. And he says, well, I hear Salam Al Fayed's back, and Mitch said, I'm not going to spend like 2 years listening to Go-Go records over and over again. And I took it out.
Oh man, what a wild ride that's gonna be. Have you started writing that book yet?
Yeah, I have a 20,000 word outline actually. I can't believe it because I didn't start it that long ago, but clearly it's been percolating in the back of my head forever. And it's interesting because he's a guy that has the same skills as Mitch Rapp, but a very different like worldview as Mitch Rapp. More likely to find him like floating around in his pool, downing Xanax with a bottle of tequila than out doing a trail run. So right. But it's kind of an interesting perspective on the world because the world's become so complicated.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a philosophical guy, deep down, and funny. Like he's a really funny guy. His observations of the world are interesting. Like he comes out of a coma. You can think about this. If you came out of a coma today and somebody told you what had happened, you'd be like, you're bullshitting me, right? No. And so he has to listen. So let me get this straight. Over the last few years, starts ticking things off. It's kind of like, the Capitol was attacked. Nobody knows if they're a boy or a girl. And, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, waking up in 2023 would be a bit of a shock, I think. You told me one time, Kyle, that you don't hold your writing process or your writing space as precious, that you just sit down, get the work done, and it doesn't matter what's going on or where you are. Now that you're writing outside of Mitch Rapp again, has that affected your writing process? You said you've got a 20,000 word outline. Is approaching, granted, this is a character you've written before, but it's been a little bit. Did you fall into certain writing patterns with Mitch Rapp, and now that Mitch is off the table and we're back to Fade, does that open you up creatively in any new or unusual ways?
No, my life is a little chaotic right now. My house is being renovated, and so I swear I move like once a week to a new temporary housing. So it's kind of lucky. I think a lot of people have their I have to face north and sit in my lucky chair and type on my lucky typewriter and all that.
Right.
But I can do whatever. In fact, I think I sent a picture around about it once, and it was an idea I had for a Mitch Rapp book, and it was scrawled across the top of the outfeed table for my table saw because I happened to be out in the garage, and I wrote it in pencil.
I love it.
So yeah, it doesn't really much matter to me where I am or what I'm doing, as long as I have a comfortable chair.
Great. The next Fade book is, are we looking at next summer?
I don't know. I haven't even pursued getting a publisher for it. So um, I was just, now we've got the release of this book. It wasn't that long ago that I finished this book.
Yeah.
And, before I went to a publisher, I wanted to have some sort of idea where I was going with it. I mean, I had some ideas, but a lot of those ideas were 10 years old, and those are not worth much now. So I had to kind of get a concrete idea of what the plot was going to be in this book. I knew what the overall concept was going to be and the arc and everything for the
Yeah.
series, and I know the character, but what was he going to be battling in this first book? And so I figured that out, and now I've got to kind of get off my butt and do something about it.
Well, I can't wait to see where it goes. Code Red Mitch Rapp book 22 will be out September 12th. Is that
September
right?
12th, yeah.
September 12th. You can pre-order it now on Amazon or go visit your local bookstore. Tell them you're anxiously awaiting the new Mitch Rapp book and support local books. But we'll have links to it in the show notes where you can pick it up from Amazon. And the Audible version, Steven Weber narrated
Yeah,
this one.
we've changed. Yeah, like George Goodall has left the franchise, which is
Wow.
He's been around for forever. Kind of
Yeah.
became the voice of Mitch Rapp. But
Steven Weber's done some amazing stuff though, so I can't wait to
I
hear.
just listened to some stuff, some
Nice.
pieces of it, and it sounds great. So
I
I
bet.
think people are going to be great. People are going to love it, but it's very weird because it's it's harder than what I did, because at least I can work. I mean, I work in the same font as Vince, right? But no matter how great you are, if people hear George in their head
Right.
when Mitch talks, it's
Yeah.
like a weird transition. So everybody's got to relax and and enjoy it, because it's change, but it's a little. I mean, you like if your wife's voice suddenly changed.
Right.
It's kind of weird, but I think once you listen to it for a little while, he does just an incredible job.
Well, and that will release on release day, I'm sure.
My assumption is, that it's the same day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Code Red, Mitch Rapp book 22 out on September 12th. Go grab it. Kyle, tell people where they can find you online if they want to follow along for all the exciting news coming up.
Yeah, at Kyle Mills author, and that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the normal. I guess Twitter is X now.
This
And
week.
KyleMills.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. I send something out once a month, keep people abreast of what's going on. And email. To get on my website, you can email me, and I read and personally respond to all my emails.
Excellent. We'll link up all those places in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you. Kyle, always a pleasure catching up. We're going to send everyone to pick up their copy of Code Red, and you have a legion of fans out there waiting for what comes next.
Yeah,
Thanks for taking time.
It's nice to know that.
Excellent. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.